Well, we're going to get started. Whoop, I messed that up. Let's push this one. There we go. All right, everybody. Welcome back to the Areopagus. First off, I want to say thank you for being patient with us in this endeavor of Genesis. I have been doing some thinking and some praying, and I'm hoping to feel peace about what changes I may introduce starting next week about this process. Just because I don't want to drag this out for 20 episodes, which I think we're already going to be close to it anyway, which I apologize profusely for that. But just to prepare y'all, and y'all can start to bathe this in prayer too, and to help me feel at peace about this, but start doing a chapter, an episode. And at least that way we can hit the high points of each chapter.
You mean you don't want to continue on doing a sentence per episode?
No, I don't. Now, with that
or
being,
half a sentence per episode,
or 3 words per episode.
Yeah.
Now, I will say if we get into discussion, and I don't want to brush past things, but at the same time, this can't drag on for forever.
Yeah.
So today we will wrap up chapter 1.
All right.
Looking at a couple of things, there's really 3 things I want to hit on. We will start at day 4 of creation. That is probably going to take the majority of the time. We will talk about day 5. We will definitely look at day 6 when man is created. And when we get to day 7, when God rests, I'm coming to you, Scott, because I've been thinking about what you said 2 episodes ago about us still being in the 7th day. And I've been trying to wrap my head around that. And I can't, because I've never even heard that or thought about that. But I kind of want to hear from them and you why that is your frame of thought. So we'll wrap up with that, and then we will start officially start chapter 2 next week in verse 4. But today we are going to start in day 4 of creation. And I will go ahead. That is verses 14 through 19. I'm going to go ahead and read it. And we will start getting into the nuts and bolts of creation day 4. So in verse 14 it says, "And God said, let there be lights in the expanse from the heavens to separate day from night. And let them be for signs and for seasons, and for days and for years. And let them be lights in the expanse of the heavens to give light upon the earth. And let it be so. And God made 2 great lights, a greater light to rule the day, and a lesser light to rule the night and the stars. And God set them in the expanse of the heavens to give light on the earth, to rule over the day and over the night, and to separate the light from the darkness. And God saw that it was good, and there was evening, and there was morning the first day. So I just read out of the ESV. In a couple of translations, I think the CSB, it says it specifically states the sun for the day and the moon for the night.
Put it in the expanse of the sky to separate the day from the night.
Right. And so in some translations, it specifically names the sun and the moon and the stars. So one thing before we dive into the light and the sun being created and different things like that, I want to get y'all's opinion on something.
Okay.
Because it's something that I've really not looked into, but kind of put together on my own accord and listening to all these weird shows that I watch. I'm that person who watches the Ancient Aliens and all those kind of documentary shows on history and travel, discovery. I like those kind of shows. It's weird, okay? I am a nerd.
Yeah, I like to watch them too.
I mean, it's it is interesting information. I take it with a grain of sand or a grain of salt. That's the word I was looking for. But it's interesting to see people's thoughts and perspective and points of views on things.
Sure.
But one thing that I've looked at that I want to discuss first is when it says in verse, where'd it go? 14, when he says for signs and for seasons and for days and for years. So I actually, in one of my classes, I don't remember if it was in the literature I had to read or if it was something I've read looking for something else, but it put a lot of pieces in my own puzzle together. And so when you look at the way we measure time, and you look at the sun, and you look at the moon, and you look at the stars, and you look at these great creations in the expanse God has made, all through, at least through 1st century, 2nd century BC time, every calendar they used was based off of a lunar cycle. For the most part, they did everything by a lunar cycle. So a lunar cycle is 28 days. When you look at the way that breaks down in time, that puts the moon, well, what was it that I read and saw, doing its full circuit in like 23 hours and 17 minutes, something like that, compared to the 24-hour sun, which our solar time, which is our day, which is our 24-hour day, how we base our time is a solar schedule. Well, then you get to the stars, your celestial calendar. A celestial calendar where we got our 365 day from, it does a complete rotation every year at 365 days. So a celestial clock is moving at like 24 hours and 40 something minutes per day. So when you look at the different schedules of time, we have 3 different calendar or time frames in our expanse,
Mhm.
which is very interesting to me because the sun, in my reading and understanding, was the least used. They used a lunar time frame and then a celestial time frame because they would navigate by the stars and different things like that. All these great buildings and the pyramids and the different what's the word? It starts with M. Monolithic structures all have a celestial setting. They say that once a year the three pyramids of Egypt line up exactly with Orion's belt, which in my brain is phenomenal that they could do that within so many. I think they said at most it's off by like less than 3 degrees.
Mhm.
I mean, it's phenomenal at how precise they could do that. But my question is, what are y'all's just simple thoughts on those 3 time bodies that we use in our world? I mean, we don't, in today's culture, don't really use a lunar time frame anymore. But
Well, that's because we understand more about, how everything goes around. But, well, my understanding in the Jewish calendar was based more on 30-day periods. So there again, it would replicate closer to a lunar cycle than a solar cycle, right? So we're a little bit closer because it's 28, point blah 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 blah, right? So it rounds a little bit better, and 60 did have some significance.
Yeah, you talked about
so that number 360
would
would have been a significant number. So that being divisible by 60.
a lot.
Yeah. So there again, any of the multiples of 60 would also have some significance. So 30 there again is half of 60. So, there again, 360 circle, 360 days. But from what I understand, the ancient Hebrews, what they would do is they knew that they were off. So what they would do is I think it's 12 years, they would add a 13th month. Or maybe it was 10 years, they would add a 13th month to take into account that they had miscalculated the solar cycle.
So speaking of that 13th month, referring to an unneeded statement made by Shane last week, I have seen and heard and looked that if you break our 365-day calendar out, if you go to 364, you divide that by 28 because that's what the lunar cycle based. We actually have 13 months, and then the last day is I forget, like a free day, which is the start of the calendar year. With that being said, when you look at a couple of different things that, those rabbit holes that I chase a lot, when you look at a couple of prefixes from some of our words, September, October, November, December, Sept is 7, Oct is 8, Nov is 9, Dec is 10. So the loop around in that hole was, well, that would make September our 7th month, October our 8th month, November our 9th month, and December the 10th month of the year, not the 9th, 10th, 11th, and the 12th, which goes back to that 13-month year. Like I said, that's a rabbit hole that if you've never gone down it, it's interesting, because when you look at all that, it goes back to April is actually the first year of the month, which puts us closer to the time of Passover, and which is where Easter comes in so many days after the start of the new moon, and going into April, the spring is when life is renewed, and all that puts April is actually the first month of the year, but that only works in a 13-month year.
Right.
So that's just, anyway, I'm sorry, I went way off. It's just an interesting thought, though, that things change because August was named after Augustus Caesar.
Right.
So, I mean, you get these different changes in names throughout time, just
Right.
depending on who the ruling culture is.
Right. So, yeah, I do think that it's interesting, and there again, you know, we define a day now, right? So there's a scientific definition,
Right.
right? So here we're talking about a theological definition,
Mhm.
right? So yeah, now we have to back up and go, okay, well, what did the ancients think a day was? What was that period of time? Now that also may be part of the reason the lunar is the reason why they started in the evening, not in the morning,
Right,
or
and
at midnight, right?
Right, and because you can, because I read this somewhere, and it was an interesting read. I wish I would have saved it. But when the new moon starts, you can always see the new moon, that tiny sliver right before dusk,
Right.
and that's how they knew it. It was was the first evening
Right.
of that next time frame.
Right.
Was at the dusk. You could just see that first little sliver on the moon. That was day one. Deal.
Well, now also remember that these people that we're talking about here live closer to the equator, right? So if we're talking about somebody that would have lived on the poles, right? So what do we get in Alaska? We get
More
eternal.
sun, yeah.
Well, we get
sun.
eternal night
or eternal day. Yeah.
right? Because we're farther away from that. So the tilt of the Earth. Now I'm exaggerating, right? So the tilt of the Earth as I go around, right? I'm blind, right, to the sun or to the moon as we're doing it. So some of that has to do with the positioning of the people that were making the observations, right, and going, oh, okay, well, I can see that. Well, we know that we can go out there in the afternoon and go, hey, there's the moon,
Right.
right? So, you know, some of that stuff you have to take from the standpoint of the people that are making the observations and from the standpoint of the people that are giving the explanation for what they're observing, right? So, yeah, but yeah, I don't have any problem with thinking that the ancients were using lunar, because there again, I know that particular area there was some significance to the number 360. So, you know, they would have considered that a complete year.
Right.
Right, that 360 would have been it's a complete circle. It's a complete, you know, that completion, right, you know, spring, summer, fall, winter, spring, right? So there's a circularness to that. So, so, you know, yeah, I would think that it more closely represents a lunar cycle than it would a solar cycle. So yeah.
Well, Shane, have you ever given any thought to celestial, solar, or lunar?
Seen a couple of shows
like
talking about the changes, you know, that they've made from ancient times till now, but no, it really never piqued my interest that much. Not enough to join the conversation.
Okay, that's fine. I was just curious if you, if you had ever given any thought to it. I mean,
well, to me, this particular verse is the one that really points to me that we're talking about we're talking about function, purpose, and order, not material creation.
See, that is where I'm going to say that is one of the points where you and I differ, being because I do take the creation story more literally.
Well, as material creation.
Right.
Yes.
And so, you have what we're taught all through grade school is that, now granted it's an evolutionary theory, not a biblical theory, but it's that something went boom from nothing, or nothing went boom and became something. So you have order come from chaos, which is trying to think.
Right. Now there again, I'm not sitting on the side that says that God did not create things ex nihilo, right?
Right.
Because I believe that he did. I believe that he had nothing and he created everything.
Right.
Right. So yeah, I don't understand somebody like Lawrence or dude in a wheelchair, Stephen Hawking, or even somebody that's a biologist like what's the other atheist, Dawkins, that say, well, if we put gravity, if we have gravity, well, wait a minute, gravity is something.
Right.
Right. So what I'm saying is God started with nothing and did this.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I guess what where I differ from you is whether or not I'm supposed to take this literal, right? That we're talking about this is how God did it, right? Mm-hmm. So material creation. So when in verse, isn't it 14 through 19? Yeah, let there be light in the expanse of the heavens to separate the day from the night. Okay, so that's what the light functions as.
Right.
Day and night. Right.
Or
light,
lack of.
Right.
Right.
Light, right.
Light and lack of.
Right.
Until he creates the two great lights.
Well, but so there again, it's still talking about the functions of the lights, right? It's still function.
Right, but where I'm at from you is when he creates those two great lights, the sun didn't come before Earth was made. Because the sun was created on day 4 along with the moon. Right.
Well, there again, that's where I think that's where I get into the parallels that one matches up, day 1 matches up with day 4, day 2 matches up with day 5, day 3 matches up with day 6. So it's the lights and then the luminaries, right? Mm-hmm. So he creates light and darkness in day 1. Well, the light and darkness functionality is day and night, seasons, years, mm-hmm. right? Signs, seasons, years, right? Okay, so 2, he separates everything at sky and sea, right? Okay, 2 is associated with flying stuff, or 5 is associated with flying things and fishies.
Right.
Okay, so 6 talks about the land. Okay,
day
now
3, he separates the land from the water.
Right. 6 is talking about land, animals, and man. So there's a 3.
Okay, so that's an interesting way to look at things.
There's a
parallel.
Right, and it works into 3, mm-hmm. which there again is significant. Right.
Well, there's a note in here from Spurgeon. I like his handwritten notes in here.
Yes,
is that handwritten?
It says, how there was light before there was any sun, for the sun was not created until the 4th day of the week, right. is not for us to say.
Okay, Spurgeon.
Well, I think what that is I backed up. It
confuses us. We're in good company.
Yeah, I think that's Spurgeon saying I'm backing up 5 yards and punting. Yeah. So But there again, I mean, just like we were talking about last week. I mean, how do I have light without the sun and the moon, right?
Right. And how do you have plants plants without the sun?
Right. How do you have plants? How do you have plants and animals? I mean, if well, I mean, there's a chicken and egg situation, but
Well,
I
that's
can't
the
have
chicken.
I can't have land animals without plants, because there's more land animals that eat plants than there are land animals that eat
Well, you
food.
can
Well,
technically
well,
you can have
I'm
them in any
infirm,
order
I'm
you
in-
want because
Right.
it is God doing it. And if
Right,
He wants to
and-
grow plants, He can grow plants. They're not going to die in the 7 days or 4 days until He
Or-
creates the sun. But,
Or overnight.
Right.
yeah,
Because plants are
The next day.
Plants come on day 3, and then the sun, moon, and stars come on day 4. So
Right.
I mean, it's right there
Well,
together.
they too. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And so I mean,
and
but
thinking about it, I mean, just like we don't know what was there before the universe, because I mean, how are you going to describe what things look like before God said, "Let me create a universe and all the planets, all the stars, and all that"? So what was before that? What did it look like before that? Nobody knows. Nobody has any kind of comprehension of that. But if God said, "Let there be light," He could have light with no source if that's what He wants,
Right.
and then He says, I'm going to make a source, and so made the sun and.
Well,
I don't know. It's
I'm not
impossible to
discounting
understand.
that. Yeah, I'm not discounting that fact, right? I mean, God could do it. I guess what I'm discounting is am I supposed to take this as material creation?
Right.
Right? And I don't get that sense from reading this, right? So now there again, I go back into the Hebrew. I look at those things. I probably know more Hebrew associated with Genesis 1 to 11 than I know the rest of the Bible that, isn't specifically referencing, like bohu and tohu. It's used elsewhere. Bara is used elsewhere. What is it? Bereshit, which is in the beginning, right? Or we translate to as in the beginning, is used elsewhere, right? But there again, I just don't get that sense from it. And there again, as I'm reading this, it sounds like what I'm hearing now, day 4, day 5, day 6 especially, is that I'm listening to function and order, right? I'm taking chaos and I'm turning it into order. Because ultimately what I believe is God created His ultimate temple in the cosmos, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this is what all of this is his temple in the cosmos,
Right.
right? So there again, what he used materially, and there was a book, I can't remember the authors of the book, and I may be misquoting the title, but it's essentially misreading the Bible through Westerners' eyes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we're taking this as a material creation, but is that how we're supposed to take it? Is that the lens that we're supposed to view this through? And from what I understand, in the ancient Near East, they didn't care about chronology. Is that it?
No, this is one. It's
Oh.
called cultural intelligence. It's not
Yeah.
the one I was thinking of. Sorry.
Yeah, I can see the cover of the book. It's got a guy that's got glasses on. It's kind of a bluish cover on the book. But anyways, it was an interesting read. And there again, I think that it was something that foundationally built up that idea that I need to make sure that I'm looking at the Bible through the correct filter, right? So,
but when you stop and think about it, okay, I mean, we all are under the understanding that Moses was given the word. Moses wrote Genesis,
Sure.
right?
sure.
And Moses lived what, 2,000 years before Christ? Was that right? 1800?
2,500.
2,500? Okay. So 2,500 years.
Isn't that right? Yeah.
So from today, we'll just round up and say 5,000 years ago.
Sure.
This information was given to him by God.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Think of the understanding that God's going, okay, I've got to give it to them in a way that they understand it, where they can write it down, You know, so the understanding that we now have, not to degrade, people 4,000 or 5,000 years ago, but obviously we've got a better understanding of things than they did at the time. So I think a lot of this may be, relayed to them in a way that they could grasp it and understand it,
Right.
Until now. And we've just got to go, okay, there's gaps here. There's things that we can't put our jigsaw puzzle together, and we're just going to have to be okay with it
Right,
as well.
because we've lost
I
the
mean-
context of it.
Because
Right.
I
Yeah.
can tell you, early on, Genesis used to just confuse the credit. It's like Revelation. I just most of the time stay away from it until the past few years, and then I was able to read it and go, okay, if I don't understand something, I'm moving right past it. It doesn't there's nothing that this says that makes a difference in my belief system,
Right.
and so,
Right.
it's
It
better
doesn't
not
affect
to get
the
hung up
core-
on it. And
Right.
as somebody that got hung up on it, that's what I've always tried to stay away from when I'm talking to other people is, don't get caught here. Don't stop just because you see a detour in the road. You
Oh,
don't have to know what's at the end of that.
Oh,
you
yeah.
just keep on going.
I definitely do not I'm gonna say talk about, but get past surface level of God created with
A new Christian.
anyone except like in a situation like this,
Right.
where I know for the most part the level of foundation of the people that I'm talking to.
Mhm.
Right. Well,
Because if you dive into this as either a non-Christian or a very new believer, this is just it's too much.
And it's too easy to hit something that you
And
don't
get stuck
understand
on
and say,
and then
I don't
miss the whole
understand
point.
it, so I'm going to give up on it.
right.
And that's
Well, and I guess that's the reason why in this conversation that I've tried to push my viewpoint,
Mm-hmm.
because I do think that it's a legitimate viewpoint. I mean, if I didn't, I wouldn't argue it.
No,
Yeah.
no.
If I didn't,
mean, it's-
now there's some like the gap theory. I'm not a huge fan of the gap theory. I don't think that that's what I read in here. Right.
I don't.
So,
I don't think there's a different creation in between verse 1 and verse 2.
right.
It's
So-
all the same.
It's all the same
creation.
story. Right. Right. So given that, right, it has to have some contextual sense to it. And there again, when I read it, I'm seeing form and function from chaos.
Mhm.
Right. So, and I'm also trying to reconcile what I believe. There again, I have no reason to doubt that the universe is, 14 billion years old. I have no reason to doubt that. Now, there again, I know that the Jewish calendar says that this is 5780 some odd,
Mhm.
right?
It's just shy of 6,000.
Right. So the Jewish calendar says that it's 6, so somebody sat down and added up all the numbers and came up with 6,
Right.
right? Okay, well, all right. Well, there again, I'm questioning those numbers because if you're using the math on some of this stuff, there again, I don't believe that the ages of people that are listed in there are real. I don't think that those were supposed to be taken as real numbers.
So
wait, what do you
But-
mean?
so you don't think
I don't
that
think Methuselah-
Adam lived for 900?
I don't think Methuselah was 900 years old when he died. No, I don't.
So,
But
so-
when we get there, I'll
so-
defend that.
Okay, no, you're fine. So you don't think that Moses was 500 years old when he began to build the ark?
Noah?
No.
Yeah, Noah.
No,
See, that's
no, I don't. But there again, do I have to believe that?
no.
Right.
I mean, no. It's and
Now, there again, do I believe that there was a cat named Noah that
who built
got
the boat
right to save
by the
people?
flood?
Well,
Right.
I
So,
can't help
do I
but
believe
believe
that?
their age because I just don't see at what it would have been there's 8 of them, so 4 males. 4 males
4
building that.
females.
I know, but
Well, yeah.
4 males doing the heavy construction, building the ark on the size and scope that the Bible describes it as. In a normal lifetime, there's no way.
Yeah.
So if I believe the ark story, then I've got to believe the age
The age
story.
story.
To me.
Yeah. Well, that may, it's wrapping my head around. Okay, so
But there again, I'm not-
wrapping my head around the age of these people, coming from a medical background, knowing how the body ages, does keep me in this.
that
How
confused
can
me.
that be?
Yeah.
Because God said that
But-
at a certain point, He said, "Yeah, I don't like
Y'all-
this.
y'all living
I'm going
too
to
long."
change it,
Right.
Right.
and you're not going to live this long anymore."
and it's also the point to where at the flood, a lot changed post flood.
Mm-hmm.
Well, no, there is some evidence that there was a decrease in the human population on the planet during the Ice Age, the last Ice Age. So having that decrease in population, there again, I would agree that we have archaeological and scientific evidence that seems to point that there was way fewer people than there were prior to the Ice Age. So, there again, I don't have any problem with some of the things that we're talking about there. Now, I'm foreshadowing a lot, and that's several chapters away, right? But my point is there again, I believe we're talking about function, especially if we're looking at day 4, 5, and 6.
Right. So
That we're looking that God's giving a purpose to the plants that now they can be used for animals. That the air and the water can be used by the birds and the fishies.
So I want to move on past day 4.
Okay. So there again, 5 is
Not for any particular reason. I mean, we are more than halfway through our time, which I knew that would encompass a lot of this time. But like I said, I want to get to the day of rest because I really want to hear about that because I can't process, and I've been trying since you said that 2 or 3 episodes ago. But your parallels,
Mhm.
they really make sense looking at it. It really does make sense when he references "Let there be light" on day 1, and then you have the creation of the 2 great lights.
the functions of the light.
So
Right.
I can't use
that I
that
can't.
word.
Yeah.
I can't bring myself to use that word yet.
Well,
okay?
But there again,
I
we know
understand it,
right.
but I'm still looking at it from a literal
Now
standpoint.
we know that the stars produce their own light, right? Because they're suns.
Hang on, can I jump in? I want to
Yeah.
ask y'all a question. Okay,
Uh-huh.
Is there light in this room?
Yes.
Okay, how do you know there's light in this room?
Because we can see it.
Well, because we've defined what light
Okay,
is.
can you see it without looking up?
Yeah.
Yes, the spread of
Okay,
it.
so that we agree that that's light, but that's the source.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so God created light. Didn't say he created a source. He created
Created the
light
light.
itself.
Right.
And I think there's a distinction between the two. When he says, "Let there be light," he created light.
Which goes into the parallel.
Well, there again,
You
I
don't know what
I
existed. Tell me what existed before that.
Right. Well, there again, light is not even easily defined in science, right? We don't know if it's particle or wave. We think it's a whole lot of things,
Well, yeah,
and we think it's nothing.
Well, that's my point. Is
Right.
you go back.
Look at
at the very
darkness,
beginning.
and darkness is simply described as the absence of light.
Right.
At the very first sentence is in the beginning. God created the heavens and the earth.
Right.
The earth was.
How do you know? Could you see it?
No, but Moses was told it.
Well, no,
Right.
no. What I'm saying is, you know, that's what my point is. Our feeble minds can't wrap our heads around this
Right.
because what was before that?
Right.
Well,
You know, and that's when-
and
when
we,
he
we
says-
don't know, and we will never know.
Well,
on
we
this
will
side.
know eventually.
Right, on this side, on this side of death, we'll never know.
Right, but I'm just saying, as a general statement, let there be light. You have to take it as there was nothing. God created light.
Well, if I'm going to
We
take
only
this,
know
right,
light
if I'm
from
going to take this as
sources.
material creation, yes, I could take that. I could take your argument that God could create light without any source.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah. I mean, that's
that's possible. I mean,
Right.
I'm not gonna say it would be impossible because, there again, it's a logically coherent sentence.
mm-hmm.
So that means that it would be possible.
Okay.
All right, you move on. Sorry about that.
No, you're fine. You're fine.
Well,
So-
okay. So 4, 5, and 6 are essentially putting the lights in the sky, putting the plants on the earth, and the fishies,
Mm-hmm.
and the birds.
Birds and
right,
then
and then
the
the animals-
livestock and the man.
Man, right. So that's day 6 is
Right.
livestock and the man.
So I really do like your parallel. I never saw that until, day one. I see it as, or what makes sense in my small brain is a step 1 and a step 2. So step 1 was creating the heavens and the earth, light, separation, land and water. That's step 1. Step 2 was what was the light, filling the air and the waters, filling the land that was created.
Right.
So the parallel kind of runs a step 1 and a step 2.
Well, and there
type.
again, we have to understand something else, that the ancients didn't understand that the sun was reflecting off the moon, and that's why we see it as glowing in the sky. The ancients thought that it produced its own light.
See, I'm with them on that because because if the moon is on the opposite side of the earth and is size-wise completely blocked out by the earth, how can it reflect the light of the sun if the sun can't hit it?
Well, because we have actually been there and seen it, right? And we know that there's a dark side of the moon that doesn't happen, right? And it's a pink
I'll
Floyd
get
album.
into the moon landing. I'm going.
Yeah.
I'm telling you right now.
Stop, Shane.
I'm done.
Just stop. I'm not. I'm gonna look like I'm psychotic, but that's. I see. I see the moon as its own light source currently. That is where my brain, when I'm out, I see the moon, and I see, and I can see the light it gives off. I don't understand how a dusty, dull rock can reflect anything.
Well, it's a space station for aliens. But anyway,
It's hollow.
I've seen the movie.
They live on the dark side of the moon.
I've seen the movie.
Right. They all live on
I
the-
have a question for y'all, since we're obviously not going to make it where we want it to go.
Well, no,
considering there's 15 minutes left.
And,
Well,
and
I do
we
have
will.
a question before we
We will.
leave Genesis, before we get further into it, and we're talking about the order of creation,
Mhm.
and you jump over here. So from 1, and by the time you get to verse 27, man
Look.
has been made on earth.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know.
So
Yeah, right. So that
God created heaven. He created the earth.
Mhm.
He created
yeah, so,
all the stuff that goes in it
so
and a
24,
way for it to survive. An atmosphere.
24 25, wait a minute, 24,
Okay.
25, 26,
At what point did the angels
27,
get made
28.
and Satan get tossed out of heaven in this story?
Yeah, that's a see.
So, yeah, I guess it's through the rest of the chapter.
See, the answer to that question, from my understanding, was written in about somewhere between 400 and 350 BC in Enoch 1.
Mhm.
That
Yeah.
is where that answer
Yeah.
is
Comes from.
comes from. Now, like I said, I think it was the one before you came back. There's so much left out of the first 11 chapters of Genesis, and you really see it when you get today and get to chapter 6, because chapter 6 verse 1 to verse 4, there's you're giving this much information over a time frame that's this big.
Mm-hmm.
So there's obviously a lot that God did not seem deemed to express to
Right.
Moses. So
Well, it says in the first line, God created heaven and the heavens, and that could have been everything
Well, they're
now,
good.
regarding heaven.
Now, a good theory of that is a movie that you and I have both mentioned that is a very interesting movie to watch. I recommend, if you are firm in your foundation, if you were new to Scripture and God, or you are not sure yet, do not watch this movie because it'll confuse you even more than it already can. But Nefarious.
Yeah.
That is an excellent movie to start to ponder things
Mhm.
with. But after watching it, I am definitely glad I know my foundation before I ever watched it, because that could have wrecked a lot of things if I
Mhm.
was new to my faith.
Yeah.
So anyway,
All right. Get train back on the track.
yeah. Well, you had to ask about the
I know.
angels.
I know. It popped in my head.
I'll tell you, my whole thesis about us still being in the seventh day
Yes,
has to
yes,
do
I want to
with-
get there.
has to do with the tagline.
Okay.
Right. So in days 1 through 6, the day ends with it was evening and morning, the day.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Okay, show me where that is on the seventh day.
So day 7, the day of rest, is in chapter 2. It starts chapter 2 off. It's verses 1 through 3. I'll go ahead and read those, and we'll wrap up our last 10 minutes here. It says, "Thus the heavens and the earth were finished, and all the host of them." I do have a question about that phrase. "And on the seventh day, God finished his work that he had done, and he rested on the seventh day from all his work that he had done. So God blessed the seventh day and made it holy, because on it God rested from all his work that he had done in creation."
Okay, so nowhere in there did I hear, and there was evening and morning the seventh day.
Right. Okay.
Right. So there again, there's parallelism that goes on a lot in Scripture, right? So I say
Oh, yeah.
something, I say 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 something different that catches my attention, right? So
Or we see something that goes back and forth.
well, right, and
Yeah.
then if we don't see that, we're going, why isn't that the normal pattern when we're describing it? So there again, why is not the tag on the seventh day?
So that makes you think that God is still in his day of rest.
Right.
Or we're still in the seventh day.
Right. So there again, if he created things, if he was ordering his cosmic temple, right?
Mhm.
So he's, or his cosmic creation, right? Well, he's sitting up on high, right?
Looking down as if we're grasshoppers. As
Well,
a foot,
well,
foot,
there again,
footstool.
looking at his creation
Yeah.
and saying that it was very good, right? Because there again, he's not constrained by. Now, I don't want to get into the argument of whether or not God is or isn't in time, and that thing
Yeah,
gives
we're
me a
not-
headache.
Yeah,
But
we're not
anyways,
going into that.
so, but I will say from this standpoint that he is not constrained by time,
hmm
right? So on either end, if time is in fact finite, on the other end of it, right? We know it's finite on the start. Whether it's finite on the other end of it, we don't know. But God sits above that, looking at his creation. I still think that analogy applies. So there again, he's not creating anything. So whatever that creation process was, we haven't seen new species of things.
Created.
Right. We haven't seen any other landmass. We haven't seen another universe being created on top of this universe, right? So there's nothing else that's being created from the standpoint of order function, right?
So
Of
that makes more
chaos
sense.
order function.
Right.
Right.
So that makes more sense now than it did when me and Ed
Mhm.
had this talk about. I think it was the way you asked the question.
Right.
You asked, "Is God still working?"
Right.
And you can see God working throughout Scripture. I think it's the difference is, you see God still working versus is God still creating?
Right. Is God still doing the acts that he was doing in 1 through 6? And the answer to that is no. He's not. Now, there again, how he is interacting with the creation, right? There could be some debate. There could be some theological debate about how he interacts with it, right?
Well, yeah,
So
yeah.
miracles, are miracles real or not?
Right. I mean, he speaks.
Right.
He speaks to Moses through
Right.
a burning bush. He leads. He leads them by a pillar or a fire. He parts the Red Sea. I mean, there are acts of work that are physically seen.
Right. That we see his coattail, right?
Right.
Okay. So how he interacts with that then is, I don't think is an act of creation, right?
Correct.
How
understand.
he's, for lack of a better word, how he's manipulating it to be very good, right? How he's manipulating creation from this standpoint now is him working towards his will, his ultimate will. It's not that he's creating anything.
Right. And
He's not doing 1 through 6 anymore.
Right. And it kind of makes
Well,
more
let me put it this way. He's not doing it that we're aware of.
I think
or
it
that
was. I think it was the verbiage. I think
Maybe,
it was
okay,
way.
then if it's the verbiage, I apologize for
No,
that.
no. You're fine. I think it was because you asked us, "Is God still working?" After you made the comment, I think we're still, or you
Right.
believe we're still in the day of rest.
Seventh, yeah.
And the seventh day.
Yeah.
Versus today, he ends his creation.
Well, and there again, I think I was trying to clarify myself some too, because,
Right.
Yes, I believe that God parted the Red Sea, that he dried up the land even in the Red Sea for the Israelites to walk.
Because you're right.
Right.
After millions of people walk through those last few 100,000 would have been up to their waist in mud. I mean,
yeah. So
but so yeah, it.
so yeah. Do I believe that God is intervening in history? Yes. He intervened in history to resurrect himself, right?
I've never, like I said, I've never heard that thought process.
Now
that
there
we're
again,
still in the day of rest.
Okay,
That's an
so-
interesting.
So if we're talking about what we think of as a 24-hour day, right, or however many hour day the ancients thought a day was,
Right.
right? Well, the seventh day then is at least 6,000 years long, right? We're no longer talking about hours, right?
Right.
We're talking about 57 centuries, right? So there again, my argument for this to be a literal day, then why didn't I tag the seventh day the same way that I tagged the rest of them? Now, I admit I'm arguing out of absence. I'm arguing out of something not being there.
Mm-hmm.
But I know that there's a lot of parallelism that's in the Bible. So I think I'm making a fairly, I think I'm okay making that educated guess that there's
It's
something different
definitely
about
an
the
interesting
seventh
thought.
day.
To me, it is definitely an interesting thought. It makes more sense to me now looking at the two ways it's
No.
been posed. The creation versus working. It makes and it makes more sense from the creation standpoint versus the working standpoint.
Well, if you want,
So-
if you want a better argument than I'm giving you right now, look up John Lennox's 7 Days That Changed the Universe or the World.
Mm-hmm.
Look that up.
Okay.
Now it's about an hour and a half.
Is it
yeah,
on
YouTube.
YouTube?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think Eric Metaxas, if you know who he is he's a broadcast journalist that's a Christian. I think he actually has a show. Maybe at one point it was on TBS, but I've occasionally seen it as a YouTube deal. But Eric Metaxas is a pretty good guy. He's Greek. He's actually pretty funny too. But anyways. But look at John Lennox. He one of the things that I've always liked about John Lennox is even though he's brilliant, I can listen to him and I can go, oh, I understand what that cat's saying,
Right.
So, yeah, it would be a good thing. And there again, he makes a point. He makes that point. Now, I don't know that was the first time that I had ever heard that point made, right? But I think that Lennox gives a good talk about it, and he gives a good talk about that we make a whole lot more of the 7 days of creation that really need to be there, right? That we're fitting and fussing about stuff that what I mean, that we really shouldn't be fitting and fussing about.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's just
Right.
It's like I said, this is definitely a conversation I wouldn't have with somebody new to their faith. It's definitely a talk that has just piqued my interest. I mean, it's an interesting concept and way to look at things. It's definitely, I think it's fun to talk about. These first 11 chapters that we'll eventually cover. We got 10 more to go now.
One down.
Will not affect my foundation in Christ and whom Christ is for me. It's just an interesting conversation to have with other people who want to talk about things.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
I mean, that's
Right. I would
really it.
agree.
It's I know that my perspective on things is, for lack of better, is way different. And probably my fault from all these rabbit holes I've dove into.
Well, the problem is you can get into rabbit holes.
Oh
in there.
yeah,
Right.
quickly. But it's following them up in scripture.
Well, and I
I think.
also, I mean, if we're going to leave kind of the creation and get into more of man, right? So
Mhm.
there's a little bit of creation in 2. But, you know, if we're leaving that and getting into Adam and Eve, you know,
And we
Right.
and I mean we'll get into 2 next week. I've heard that, you know, what's the word? The Bible contradicts itself, and I hear that a lot in between Genesis 1 and Genesis 2. It's 2 different creation stories. I'm going to.
I don't believe that.
I don't
Right.
either. My perspective, which we'll dig into more next week, is chapter 2 is a more detailed version of day 6.
Well, yeah, I
I
think
mean
that
And that's when he creates the garden. So I mean,
Right, he
it kind of is a different creation story because he created specifically the Garden of
I
Eden
think
for
we're getting more detail.
man to. Yeah,
I think it's just detailed more of day 2, 3, and 6. We're just getting more information.
well,
You get the general story. Now I'm going to give you a little more specifics.
hmm
And so that's my quick thoughts. We'll get into that more next week. It is time to wrap up. We are on the red. So it's done flashed and did its thing. So this timer's great. We can see we're not running way over.
yeah.
But guys, I thank them and y'all again.
You bet.
We got through chapter 1.
Yay.
I'm so happy. But thank y'all for being here. We will be back next week to dive into chapter 2, and like I said, I appreciate if y'all would bathe in prayer. I'm going to bathe in prayer throughout this next week. That the goal is to achieve a chapter an
episode. Sure.
And if something happens and we get into more, just because there's not a lot of detail or a lot of specifics to discuss, then if we can knock out 2, whatever it may be, we'll do it. So,
Okay.
but guys, I thank them and y'all for being here. I thank them and y'all for watching, and we will see y'all next week.